The sample analysis chamber hummed with sterile efficiency as Supreme Commander Vex'thor of the Kaldreth Sovereignty held up what the humans called a rifle. His three eyes studied the primitive mechanism with barely concealed amusement, mandibles clicking in a pattern his subordinates recognized as contempt. "This," he announced to the assembled war council, "is what the humans consider a weapon of war." The device was laughably simple: a metal tube, a spring-loaded mechanism, chemical propellants that created small explosions to hurl tiny metal projectiles. It was the kind of technology the Kaldreth had abandoned 17,000 cycles ago, back when their civilization was still crawling out of their own evolutionary mud. Strategic Coordinator Zithrak leaned forward, her sensory tendrils waving with curiosity. "And they use these extensively?" "Not just extensively," Vex'thor replied, setting the rifle down on the examination table, "almost exclusively. Their so-called advanced weapons are barely more sophisticated. Missiles that fly on combustion, explosives made from mixing chemicals. They still use gunpowder, Zithrak." "Gunpowder!" Laughter rippled through the council chamber, a discordant symphony of clicks, hisses, and harmonic vibrations. The Kaldreth had mastered plasma manipulation, graviton projection, and quantum disruption fields. Their smallest patrol craft carried weaponry that could vaporize a small moon. And these humans, these newcomers to the galactic stage, were still throwing metal at each other. "There's more," Vex'thor continued, pulling up a holographic display. "Their armor is woven fabric and ceramic plates. Their ships rely on chemical rockets for propulsion in some cases. Their most powerful weapon is nuclear fission, splitting atoms in a crude chain reaction. It's like watching children play with fire." Fleet Commander Korvax, a veteran of 18 conquest campaigns, studied the data with his characteristic thoroughness. "What about their numbers? Population centers?" "Approximately 8 billion on their homeworld alone," Vex'thor said. "But scattered across hundreds of colonies, disorganized. They lack a unified command structure. They still cling to something called nation-states, primitive tribal divisions that—" "Wait," Korvax's voice cut through the commander's speech. "Did you say their homeworld? You've analyzed their planet of origin?" "Of course. Standard protocol for all new species." Vex'thor pulled up another display showing the blue-green sphere of Earth. "Unremarkable, standard gravity, abundant water, moderate temperature range, nothing that would suggest—" "Supreme Commander, I recommend caution." Korvax's tone had shifted, taking on an edge that made several council members turn. "That planet, I've seen readings like that before. High oxygen content, extreme weather patterns, diverse predator species. That's a Class 7 deathworld." Vex'thor's mandibles clicked dismissively. "Your point, Fleet Commander? Species that evolve on deathworlds develop unusual characteristics, aggression, resilience, adaptability. I studied the Vraxian campaign before we wisely decided to avoid their territory. Their homeworld had similar—" "The Vraxians had quantum weapons," Vex'thor interrupted. "The humans have bullets. I appreciate your caution, old friend, but these creatures have surveyed our border territories, damaged 3 mining stations, and destroyed a supply convoy. They violated sovereignty space and must be taught their place in the galactic hierarchy. The Council of Predominant Species has authorized a punitive expedition." Korvax fell silent, but his concern lingered in the air like a toxic cloud. "We will deploy the 3rd and 5th fleets," Vex'thor continued. 27 capital ships, 43 cruisers, and supporting craft will target their colony on Arcturus Prime. 15 million humans, militarily significant but not so large that collateral. Damage will cause excessive complications with the other species. A single engagement will demonstrate our superiority and force their surrender." "And if they don't surrender?" Zithrak asked. Vex'thor's eyes glittered with cold certainty. "Then we'll teach them what real warfare looks like, one primitive colony at a time." 3 weeks later, The Kaldreth Third Fleet dropped out of quantum transit at the edge of the Arcturus Prime system. Vex'thor stood on the command deck of his flagship, the Sovereign Retribution, watching the tactical display populate with data. "Enemy contacts?" he asked. "Detecting 17 ships in orbit around the colony world," the sensor operator reported. "Classification appears to be frigates and destroyers. No capital ships. Combined tonnage less than a single one of our cruisers. Perfect." "Battle formation Helix 7, Vex'thor ordered. All ships, advance at combat speed. Communications broadcast the standard surrender terms." The Kaldreth fleet moved like a school of metallic predators, their plasma arrays beginning to glow with lethal energy. The human ships, by contrast, seemed almost comically outmatched. Their hulls were crude welded metal. Their propulsion systems left visible trails of chemical exhaust. They looked like they'd been assembled in a scrapyard. The communications officer looked up. "Supreme Commander, we're receiving a response from the humans. Already? That was faster than expected. Are they surrendering?" "No, sir. The message simply says, 'Come and take it.'" Vex'thor's mandibles spread in what passed for a smile among his species. "Brave. Foolish, but brave. Very well. All ships, weapons, free. Disable their orbital platforms first, then target their ships. I want overwhelming. Multiple launches from the human vessels," the tactical officer shouted. "Detecting. Counting. Supreme Commander, I'm reading over 400 individual projectiles inbound. Missiles?" Vex'thor asked calmly. "Point. Defense will handle them. Maintain course." But as the projectiles closed, something seemed wrong. They weren't maneuvering like guided missiles. They followed ballistic trajectories, dumb and straight. And they were fast, accelerating at rates that would turn any living crew to paste. "Impact in 20 seconds, Tactical announced. 15, 10. The first railgun slug hit the cruiser-dominant Will amidships. The depleted uranium penetrator, traveling at a significant fraction of light speed, punched through the shields like they weren't there. The kinetic energy release was catastrophic. The cruiser's entire midsection simply ceased to exist, converted to plasma and debris in a microsecond. "What? Shields are ineffective," someone was screaming. "The projectiles are solid matter, no energy signature for the arrays to lock onto." More impacts. The destroyer Claw of Justice took 3 hits in rapid succession, each one boring completely through the vessel. The frigate Silent Conquest detonated as a slug hit something critical, the explosion so bright it temporarily overloaded visual sensors. "Evasive maneuvers," Vex'thor commanded. But the order came too late for 5 more ships. The projectiles, they were just metal, he realized with growing horror, didn't care about their advanced shielding. Kinetic barriers required power, sophisticated field generators, precise calculations. The humans were just throwing metal, and it was working. Return fire, all plasma arrays. The Kaldreth weapons spoke, beautiful beams of superheated matter streaking across the void. They hit the human ships and partially deflected off angled armor. The humans had armor designed to reflect energy weapons, layers of ablative material that vaporized to dissipate heat. Primitive but effective. "Human ships are launching secondary weapons," Tactical reported. "Detecting chemical signatures, missiles with conventional warheads." "Conventional?" Vex'thor repeated. "Like the artifacts from our museums?" The missiles were slow compared to the railgun slugs, but there were hundreds of them, and they were smart. They came in waves, overwhelming point defense systems through sheer numbers. When they hit, they didn't carry exotic matter or quantum effects. They carried high explosives, shape charges, and fragmentation warheads. The destroyer Absolute Dominion took a dozen missile hits. Its shields, designed to repel energy and charged particles, did nothing against physical explosions. Armor buckled, hull plating tore. A particularly well-placed shot breached the plasma conduits, and the ship tore itself apart from the inside. "We've lost 9 ships," Korvax reported, his voice tight. He'd taken tactical command when the battle turned chaotic. Severe damage to 12 more. The humans are using kinetic kill vehicles and conventional explosives. Our defensive systems weren't designed for this type of warfare. Then adapt them, Vex'thor snarled. We have 27 capital ships. They have 17 primitive. 14 now, sir. We've destroyed 3, then keep firing. But the humans weren't fighting like any enemy the Kaldreth had faced. Their ships moved erratically, using unpredictable bursts of thrust that made targeting difficult. They fired their railguns in coordinated volleys, saturating specific zones rather than spreading their fire. And when Kaldreth ships closed to plasma range, the humans pulled back, refusing to fight on the aliens' terms. One human destroyer, trailing atmosphere from a dozen holes, made a suicide run at the cruiser Eternal Supremacy. The Kaldreth ship's plasma arrays carved it apart, but not before the human vessel launched, its entire payload at point-blank range. 50 missiles, 20 railgun slugs. The Eternal Supremacy vanished in a fireball that registered on sensors as a small nuclear detonation. Wait, nuclear? Did they put nuclear warheads on conventional missiles? Vex'thor demanded. Analyzing. Yes, Supreme. Commander. Fission weapons in the low kiloton range. Multiple hits are registering secondary radiation signatures. These humans, these primitive throwbacks, were using weapons so crude that they generated radioactive fallout. And it was working. The Kaldreth ships, with their sophisticated sensors and delicate equipment, were vulnerable to electromagnetic pulses and radiation in ways that the humans' simpler, more robust systems weren't. Fleet composition? Vex'thor asked, his voice hollow. 16 capital ships operational, 19 cruisers, 23 support craft. Human force is down to 6 ships, all damaged. They were winning, technically, but the cost was obscene. A third of his fleet crippled or destroyed, fighting against a force that shouldn't have been able to scratch their paint. Human reinforcements arriving from the planet, Tactical called out. Detecting. Ground-based missile batteries are firing. And something else. Multiple atmospheric craft, hundreds of them. The humans called them aerospace fighters, though the term didn't do them justice. They were cramped, dangerous machines, single or dual pilot craft with chemical jet engines strapped to weapon platforms. No shields, minimal armor. But fast, agile, and equipped with weapons that the Kaldreth were rapidly learning to fear. They came in swarms, like insects from a disturbed hive. Some carried missiles. Others had rotating cannons that fired thousands of rounds per minute. A few had what appeared to be unguided rockets, weapons so primitive they were launched from simple tubes. How is any of this working? A squadron of fighters targeted the wounded cruiser Zenith of Power. The ship's point defense was offline, and its plasma arrays couldn't track the small, fast targets. The humans attacked in coordinated passes, hammering the same section of hull until something gave. When the cruiser's reactor containment failed, the explosion took out 2 more damaged Kaldreth ships. From his position, on the command deck, Vex'thor watched his perfect invasion crumble. The humans were fighting like something from a pre-civilized era, all brute force and calculated savagery. They wasted ammunition on suppressive fire. They used decoys and chaff that his sensors could barely track. They coordinated their attacks with the precision of a species that had spent centuries learning to kill each other before they ever reached the stars. "Pull back," he ordered quietly. "All ships, retreat to rally point Gamma." "Sir?" Korvax turned, surprise evident in his posture. "We still have numerical superiority. If we press the attack..." "With what?" Vex'thor gestured at the tactical display. "Half our fleet is combat ineffective. The humans have planetary defenses we haven't even engaged, and they're fighting like they have nothing to lose, like they were born for this." The retreat was orderly at first. Kaldreth discipline held as the fleet began to disengage. But the humans didn't let them go. They pursued, harrying the withdrawal with long-range missile strikes and railgun barrages. 3 more ships were lost before the fleet managed to jump to quantum space. In the silence that followed, Vex'thor stood alone in the command center. The holographic displays showed the butcher's bill: 13 capital ships destroyed or scuttled, 24 cruisers lost, 37 support craft, nearly 40% of his force, defeated by an enemy using weapons from a technological dark age. "Get me the High Council," he said softly, "all of them. And find me every piece of intelligence we have on human military capabilities, everything. Because if the humans could do this with simple kinetics and chemical explosives, what would happen when they truly went to war?" The answer came sooner than anyone expected. Supreme Coordinator Rylthak of the Galactic Council watched the report from Arcturus Prime with growing disbelief. The footage, captured by Kaldreth survivors and, surprisingly, broadcasted by the humans themselves, showed a battle that defied everything the civilized galaxy thought it knew about warfare. "They beat them with bullets," she said aloud, her translator struggling to find the right words. "Metal projectiles accelerated by chemical reactions. And it worked?" Her chief military advisor, a grizzled Thex named Vormar, nodded slowly. "The Kaldreth made a fundamental error. They assumed technological superiority equaled military superiority. The humans understand something we've forgotten, which is that war isn't about having the best weapons. It's about using what you have in ways your enemy doesn't expect." On the screen, a human soldier was being interviewed. His uniform was scorched, his face covered in soot, but his expression was calm, professional. "Did we know we'd win?" The soldier, identified as Lieutenant Colonel James Hernandez of the Colonial Defense Force, repeated the reporter's question. "No, but we knew we'd fight. That's what you need to understand about humanity. We come from a world that tried to kill us every day for millions of years. Predators, diseases, weather that could freeze or cook you, earthquakes, volcanoes, tsunamis. We survived all of it. You think some aliens with fancy shields are going to make us roll over?" The reporter pressed, "But their weapons are so much more advanced." Hernandez laughed, a sound without much humor. "Advanced doesn't mean better. See, they've been fighting with energy weapons for so long they forgot about kinetic warfare. Their shields, worthless against solid matter traveling at high velocity. Their sensors, designed to track guided munitions, not dumb projectiles. They brought knives to a gunfight, and they didn't even realize it until we started shooting." Rylthak paused the recording. "Is he right? Are we all vulnerable to these kinetic weapons?" Vormar pulled up a simulation. "Preliminary analysis says yes. Most shielding technology in the galaxy focuses on energy deflection. Kinetic barriers exist but are power-intensive and rarely deployed on capital ships because most species haven't used kinetic weapons in millennia. The humans found a gap in our defenses we didn't know existed. And the Kaldreth, they're calling it the greatest military disaster in their history. Vex'thor has been relieved of command. The High Council is in emergency session." Vormar hesitated. "There's also something else you should see." He pulled up another video, this one clearly recorded from a Kaldreth ship. It showed human fighters engaging in a tactic that made no tactical sense until it did. A damaged fighter, trailing flames and leaking fuel, deliberately rammed into a Kaldreth cruiser's sensor array. "Suicide attacks," Rylthak breathed. "They call them last resorts or going down swinging," Vormar explained. 7 confirmed instances during the battle. Damaged craft deliberately targeting critical systems when their weapons were depleted. It's not doctrine, they're not fanatics, but they're willing to do it if there's no other option. That's insane. That's humanity. They didn't evolve in a safe galaxy being taught to coexist. They evolved eating each other on a world that regularly had extinction-level events. Competition, predation, violence, it's baked into their DNA. And they directed all that aggression toward survival first, then toward each other, and now," he gestured at the screen, "now toward us." Rylthak felt something she hadn't experienced in her long career, genuine fear. "What do you recommend?" "Full diplomatic engagement, immediate talks. Because if the Kaldreth thought one colony was bad, imagine what happens if we push the humans into a full war footing. They have 80 billion citizens across their territories. If they mobilize their entire species," he didn't need to finish. The implications were clear. The message from Admiral Sarah Chen reached every corner of human space simultaneously. She stood, in full-dress uniform aboard the carrier Indomitable, her expression carved from stone. To all forces of the Terran Coalition and allied worlds, we have been attacked. The Kaldreth Sovereignty, believing us weak, attempted to subjugate Arcturus Prime. They failed. But this is not the end, it is the beginning. Behind her, through the viewport, dozens of ships were visible. Carriers, battleships, destroyers, frigates, the largest fleet humanity had ever assembled. For too long, we've been the new kids in the galaxy, patient, diplomatic, trying to prove we belong at the table of civilized species, and maybe we are civilized, but let me tell you something about civilization on Earth. It was built on the backs of warriors. Every peaceful era in our history was purchased with blood. She stepped closer to the camera. The Kaldreth think we're primitive. They laugh at our kinetic weapons and chemical explosives. They mock our tactics as crude. Well, let me explain something about human warfare. We spent 10,000 years perfecting the art of killing each other. Every weapon we've invented, every tactic we've developed, every strategy we've employed, it was tested against the most dangerous enemy in the galaxy, ourselves. The camera panned to show crews loading ordnance, railgun slugs the size of cars, missile racks holding hundreds of warheads, fighter craft being fueled and armed. We're not the most technologically advanced species. We don't have the biggest ships or the most elegant weapons. But we have something you don't. We have 5 million years of evolution screaming at us to survive. We have 10,000 years of warfare teaching us to adapt. And we have 8 billion people who are really, really tired of being underestimated. Chen's eyes hardened. To the Kaldreth Sovereignty, you wanted to teach us our place? Let us return the favor. You have 72 hours to withdraw from all disputed territories and offer reparations. If you refuse, we will demonstrate exactly how dangerous a primitive species can be. The broadcast ended, but the message was clear. Humanity wasn't asking for peace, it was offering one last chance before the real war began. In the Kaldreth High Council chambers, the mood was funereal. The 72-hour ultimatum had passed with no response, not because they wanted war, but because the council was paralyzed by indecision. Some members advocated for full mobilization, others urged immediate capitulation. Most simply couldn't believe the situation had deteriorated so rapidly. Korvax, now temporary Supreme Commander following Vex'thor's disgrace, stood before the holographic display showing human fleet movements. 23 separate task forces, each heading toward Kaldreth territory. Analysis, he ordered. The humans are splitting their forces, the tactical coordinator reported. Multiple smaller fleets rather than one massive armada. Each task force is built around combined arms principles, capital ships, smaller craft, fighter screens, support vessels. They're not trying to overwhelm us with numbers. They're trying to be everywhere at once. And our response? 2nd, 4th, and 7th fleets are moving to intercept. Enhanced defensive protocols, all ships equipped with kinetic barriers and point defense optimized for solid projectiles. Korvax clicked his mandibles thoughtfully. We learned from Arcturus Prime, good. But don't assume the humans haven't learned too. They're adaptive. That's their greatest strength. Surely we can't lose again, one council member said. We have superior numbers, more resources. The Vraxians said the same thing before their empire collapsed, Korvax interrupted. Deathworld species don't play by our rules, they write their own. 3. Days later, the Battle of Threshold Station proved him right. Threshold was a major logistics hub, a massive orbital facility managing supply lines for 15 Kaldreth sectors. The Kaldreth Second Fleet, 43 ships strong with updated defensive systems, took position around the station. They were ready for kinetic attacks. They had anticipated human tactics. They weren't ready for what actually happened. The human fleet approached without subterfuge, broadcasting their position openly. 12 capital ships, 24 cruisers, 48 destroyers, and something new, 5 massive vessels that sensors classified as carriers, launching waves of smaller craft. Standard battle formation, Fleet Commander Kaldreth ordered. Activate kinetic barriers. Point defense to maximum sensitivity. When they enter range, we hit them with everything. The humans stopped at extreme range. No railgun slugs came screaming in. No missile launches. Just waiting. What are they doing? Someone asked. Then the electromagnetic pulse hit. It wasn't nuclear, no radioactive signature. The humans had weaponized something called a microwave emitter, essentially a directed energy weapon, but one that didn't damage hulls. Instead, it fried electronics. Unshielded systems overloaded. Sensors went dark. Targeting computers crashed. In the confusion, the humans launched their attack. But not directly at the ships. They're targeting the station. Kaldreth realized too late. Protect threshold. The human missiles bypassed the fleet entirely, curving on ballistic trajectories toward the undefended station. The Kaldreth ships couldn't intercept. Their point defense was blinded, their sensors scrambling to reboot. By the time systems came back online, Threshold Station's docking pylons were gone, its fuel reserves detonating in spectacular fireballs. "Return fire," Kaldreth ordered, but the humans were already moving. They'd split into 3 groups coming at the Kaldreth formation from multiple vectors. The aliens tried to respond, but coordinating 43 ships with damaged communications was chaos. And then the human fighters arrived. They came in waves, hundreds of small craft attacking from every angle. Some carried missiles, others had cannons that fired depleted uranium rounds designed to penetrate armor. A few had electronic warfare packages that jammed targeting systems at close range. The Kaldreth ship Righteous Fury took the brunt of the first fighter wave. 40 craft swarmed it, too many for point defense to handle. Missiles struck the engines, cannon fire chewed through sensor arrays. A lucky hit penetrated the bridge, explosive decompression killing the command crew. The ship, now just a drifting hulk, was left behind as the battle moved on. But the worst was yet to come. Detecting new contacts, the sensor operator reported. Small craft launching from the human carriers, designating them torpedoes? No, they're carrying single pilots. Suicide craft? They weren't suicide weapons. They were boarding craft. 30 assault shuttles, each carrying 20 human marines, accelerated toward the Kaldreth ships. Point defense destroyed most of them, but 7 made contact. Magnetic clamps locked onto hulls. Breaching charges blew through armor. And humanity's infantry poured into the alien vessels. The Kaldreth had never developed boarding tactics. Why would they? Modern warfare was fought at ranges where ships never physically touched. But the humans, with their history of naval combat and close-quarters battle, had refined boarding actions over centuries. The Marines hit the cruiser Eternal Vigilance like a wrecking ball. They moved in 4-man teams, communicating with hand signals and quick verbal commands. Their weapons, those same primitive kinetic rifles, were devastating in enclosed spaces. Bullets ricocheted off bulkheads, shredded control panels, and punched through the lighter armor the Kaldreth wore inside their ships. Contact left. Sergeant Maria Rodriguez didn't wait for the Kaldreth crew member to react. 3-round center mass, the alien's personal shield flickered and died, overwhelmed by kinetic impact. Clear. Moving up. The Kaldreth fought back with plasma pistols and energy blades, but they were scientists and engineers, not warriors. The humans were professionals who trained for exactly this scenario. Within 15 minutes, the Eternal Vigilance's engineering section was in human hands. 5 minutes after that, Rodriguez's team had set demolition charges throughout the reactor compartment. All teams, this is Rodriguez. Charges set, exfil in 2 minutes. The boarding shuttles returned, collecting the Marines. They left behind enough explosives to turn the cruiser's reactor into a bomb. When it detonated, the shockwave damaged 2 more Kaldreth ships. By the time the Battle of Threshold ended, the Kaldreth Second Fleet had lost 21 ships. The humans had lost 4. But more importantly, they demonstrated that warfare wasn't just about big guns and advanced technology. It was about combined arms, tactical flexibility, and the willingness to close with your enemy and destroy them at point-blank range. Korvax reviewed the battle reports with something approaching despair. The humans weren't just winning, they were rewriting the rules of engagement. Every battle revealed new tactics, new weapons, new nightmares. They're using everything, he said to the council. Electronic warfare, kinetic weapons, chemical explosives, cyber attacks. They've infiltrated our communication networks, boarding actions. They even deployed what they call space mines, explosive devices left floating in space that detonate when ships pass. Mines? Council leader Vex'thor repeated. You mean like historical area denial weapons? Exactly like that. Primitive but effective. We lost 3 ships to them in the Helios sector because our sensors didn't register them as threats. Another council member leaned forward. How do we stop them? I don't know, Korvax admitted. They adapt faster than we can respond. Every tactic we develop, they counter. They're not fighting to win elegantly, they're fighting to win at any cost. And they're very, very good at it. The turning point came at the Battle of Kaldreth Prime, the Sovereignty's capital world. It wasn't supposed to be a battle at all. The Kaldreth had pulled back their fleets, consolidated their forces, and fortified their home system with every defense they could muster. 300 ships, orbital defense platforms, ground-based weapons, minefields, sensor nets. It was impregnable. Admiral Chen arrived with her entire fleet, 97 ships, thousands of fighters, and one surprise the Kaldreth never saw coming. All ships, this is Chen. Commence Operation Hammer. The human fleet didn't attack the defenses. Instead, they saturated the system with electronic warfare packages. Satellites that jammed communications, broadcast false sensor data, and generally made coordinating a defense impossible. Then they launched a cyber attack, a coordinated digital assault, on the Kaldreth command network. Human programmers had spent weeks studying captured Kaldreth computer systems. They'd found vulnerabilities, backdoors, unpatched security flaws, predictable protocols. Now they exploited all of them at once. Fire control systems crashed. Orbital platforms began targeting each other. The defense network, so carefully constructed, tore itself apart. And then the humans sent in the bombers. They were called B-52. Seconds. Ancient aircraft designs updated with modern materials and vacuum-rated systems. Each one carried dozens of cruise missiles, weapons that flew on predetermined courses without needing guidance. They launched from maximum range, filling space with hundreds of warheads. The Kaldreth ships tried to intercept them, but with their sensors jammed and their targeting computers unreliable, they hit. Less than 30%. The rest slammed into orbital stations, weapons platforms, and civilian infrastructure. This is barbaric, Vex'thor screamed as reports of damage flooded in. They're not even trying to minimize collateral damage. No, Korvax said quietly. They're trying to win. The human fleet advanced through the chaos, their ships moving with practiced precision. They'd trained for this probably thousands of times in simulations. Every captain knew their role. Every crew was synchronized. The final assault lasted 6 hours. When it ended, Kaldreth Prime's orbital defenses were rubble. 73 Kaldreth ships were destroyed. And Admiral Chen's fleet sat in high orbit, railguns and missile batteries trained on the planet below. The message she sent was simple. Surrender now, or we start targeting your cities. You have 1 hour. In the council chambers, silence reigned. Outside, through the transparent steel walls, they could see human ships, those primitive, crude vessels that were supposed to be easy prey. We surrender, Vex'thor said, each word feeling like poison. Send the transmission. It's over. Korvax, watching the humans hold his homeworld hostage, thought about the conversation weeks earlier when Vex'thor had dismissed humanity as primitive. He thought about the confident march into what should have been an easy war. He thought about all the warnings he'd given that no one had heeded. Deathworld species, he remembered saying. They develop unusual characteristics. He hadn't known the half of it, the aftermath of what humans would call the Kaldreth War, sent shockwaves through the galaxy. The Sovereignty, once considered a major power, had been humbled in a matter of weeks by a species that had only achieved faster-than-light travel 3 generations earlier. Ambassador Victoria Williams stood before the Galactic Council, representing humanity for the first time since the war began. The assembled species watched her with new eyes. No longer dismissive, but wary, respectful, perhaps even fearful. "Let me be clear about something," Williams said, her voice carrying through the chamber. "We didn't want this war. The Kaldreth attacked us. We defended ourselves. That they underestimated us is not our fault. But the destruction," one representative began, "was proportional and necessary," Williams interrupted. "We used force to achieve military objectives. We followed the accepted conventions of warfare. We gave opportunities for surrender. The fact that our weapons differ from yours doesn't make us barbarians." Rilthak, speaking for the Council, chose her words carefully. "No one is suggesting that, Ambassador. But you must understand, your methods are unusual. Some would say brutal. Effective," Williams corrected. "And let's address the real issue here. You're all afraid of us. You've spent millennia developing technology, building civilizations on worlds that didn't actively try to kill you, fighting wars with elegant weapons and civilized rules. We come from Earth, a planet that has consistently tried to murder us for millions of years. We learned to fight because we had no choice. We got good at it because the alternative was extinction." She let that sink in. "Yes, we use kinetic weapons. They work. Yes, we employ tactics you consider primitive. They're effective. Yes, we're aggressive and adaptable and willing to do things you find uncomfortable. Welcome to warfare as practiced by a species that evolved fighting everything, including itself." "Then what do you want?" Vormar asked. "What are humanity's intentions?" Williams smiled, and it wasn't entirely friendly. "We want what every species wants: peace, prosperity, the chance to explore and grow. But we also want respect, and if we can't get that through diplomacy, we'll earn it through strength. Your choice." The council chambers erupted in debate, but the message was clear. Humanity had arrived on the galactic stage, and they weren't going away. 6 months later, Lieutenant Colonel Hernandez found himself in an unusual position, teaching a class on human military tactics to a mixed group of alien officers. The Galactic Council had initiated a military exchange program, hoping to understand and perhaps integrate human methods into their own doctrines. Question: a Kaldreth officer, one of the few who'd survived the war, raised a manipulator appendage. "Your weapons are simpler than ours. Your ships less advanced. How did you achieve such success?" Hernandez smiled. He'd been asked this question 100 times in 100 different ways. Because warfare isn't about having the best gear. It's about using what you have better than the enemy uses what they have. You had superior shields. We used weapons they couldn't stop. You had better sensors. We jammed them and used dumb munitions. You had bigger ships. We sent Marines to take them from the inside. He pulled up a tactical display showing the Battle of Arcturus Prime. "See this moment here? Your fleet had us outnumbered and outgunned. You should have won. But you fought the battle you wanted to fight, not the battle we gave you. That's the first rule of human warfare. Never let the enemy dictate the terms of engagement." Another officer, a Thex, spoke up. "But surely you lost many soldiers employing these aggressive tactics?" "Yes," Hernandez said simply. "War costs lives. We understand that. We accept it. But we also make sure that when we fight to win. No half measures. No hoping the enemy will surrender if we just demonstrate our superiority. We hit hard, we hit fast, and we don't stop until the job is done." He paused, his expression softening slightly. "But here's what you really need to understand. Humans are paradoxes. We're capable of incredible violence, yes, but also incredible compassion. We'll fight to the death to protect what's ours, but we'll also help rebuild what we destroyed. Look at the Kaldreth now. We're not occupying them. We're not enslaving them. We defeated them, we made our point, and now we're helping them recover. The Kaldreth officer shifted uncomfortably. Why? Because the war is over, Hernandez said. You lost. You learned your lesson. Now we move forward. That's the other side of humanity. We can be ruthless in war, but we prefer peace. We just won't accept peace through submission. In orbit above Earth, Admiral Chen stood in her ready room aboard the Indomitable, now designated as humanity's first dedicated flagship. She looked at the reports from across human space, new colonies being established, trade agreements being signed, defensive pacts being negotiated. The galaxy had changed, and humanity's place in it was secure. Her XO, Commander Marcus Okonkwo, entered with a datapad. Admiral, you're going to want to see this. Intelligence just intercepted communications from the Vraxian hegemony. Apparently, they're requesting a diplomatic meeting. No threats, no demands, just talking. Chen allowed herself a smile. The Vraxians were the species Korvax had mentioned, another deathworld race that the galaxy generally avoided. Interesting. I suppose they recognize kindred spirits. More like they're smart enough not to pick a fight with a new apex predator, Okonkwo said. The galaxy's still processing what happened to the Kaldreth. Most species are being very, very careful around us now. Good. Fear and respect aren't the same thing, but fear can lead to respect if we handle it right. Chen set down her coffee, real Earth coffee, imported at great expense, and looked out at the blue planet below. We proved we can fight. Now we need to prove we can build. Show them that humanity isn't just about war. But if someone else decides to test us, Chen's expression hardened. Then we'll teach them the same lesson we taught the Kaldreth. The universe doesn't respect the weak, and Earth didn't raise any victims. Far from Earth, in a cantina on a neutral trading station, Korvax sat with former Supreme Commander Vex'thor. The disgraced commander had been exiled rather than executed, a mercy that said much about Kaldreth society's reluctance to fully embrace the harsh realities of warfare. I was right, you know, Vex'thor said, his voice hollow. Their weapons were primitive. Their technology was less advanced. And yet they won, Korvax replied. What does that tell you? That primitiveness is not the same as ineffectiveness. Vex'thor took a long drink of something that would have been toxic to most species but merely intoxicating to Kaldreth physiology. I saw their weapons and thought them beneath us. I didn't consider that those weapons were honed through millennia of constant warfare. Every bullet, every missile, every tactic, refined through countless conflicts against the most dangerous enemy in the galaxy. Themselves, Korvax said quietly. Exactly. They spent 10,000 years learning to kill each other with maximum efficiency. We spent 10,000 years learning to avoid conflict entirely. Vex'thor's mandibles clicked in bitter amusement. We brought sophistication to a fight that required brutality. We brought finesse to an enemy that valued results over elegance. Across the cantina, a group of human merchants were laughing and sharing drinks with traders from a dozen different species. They looked so ordinary. Not like the terrifying warriors who'd shattered the Sovereignty's fleets. The worst part, Vex'thor continued, is that they're not monsters. They're not even particularly cruel by their own standards. This is just normal for them. That level of controlled violence, that capacity for devastation, it's as natural to them as breathing. They call it being born of a death world, Korvax said. Every day of their evolution was a battle for survival. It made them adaptable, resilient, and very, very dangerous. He paused. But also capable of surprising kindness. They could have annihilated us. Instead, they're helping us rebuild. A calculated move. Show strength, then mercy. Make themselves indispensable. Perhaps. Or perhaps they genuinely prefer peace but are very good at war when necessary. Korvax stood. Either way, the galaxy has changed. Humanity has arrived, and we can either learn to coexist with them or face the consequences. I know which option I prefer. As he left, Vex'thor remained behind, staring into his drink and contemplating the lesson humanity had taught. Never underestimate your enemy based on their technology. The most dangerous weapon isn't the one that looks most impressive. It's the one wielded by someone who knows exactly how to use it. The recording ended, and the automated archive system tagged it for the Galactic Historical Database. Future generations would study the Kaldreth War as a cautionary tale about assumption, arrogance, and the danger of confusing technological advancement with military superiority. But humans would remember it differently. They'd remember it as the moment they announced to the galaxy, "We're here, we're not going anywhere, and we're not to be trifled with." In classrooms across Earth, children would learn about Admiral Chen, Lieutenant Colonel Hernandez, Sergeant Rodriguez, and thousands of other men and women who'd proven that humanity belonged among the stars, not as supplicants or junior partners, but as equals, and perhaps more, because at the end of the day, humanity had learned a truth that the peaceful species of the galaxy had forgotten. Peace is a luxury afforded to those strong enough to defend it, and if there was one thing Earth's children understood, it was strength. The galaxy had been warned, the humans had arrived, and they were done apologizing for surviving. Years later, a young Kaldreth student would ask her teacher about the war. Why did we attack them if they were so dangerous? The teacher, who'd served on one of the ships at Arcturus Prime, thought carefully about her answer. Because we looked at their weapons and saw primitiveness. We looked at their tactics and saw crudeness. We looked at their ships and saw inferiority. But we never looked at them, at the species that had clawed its way to the top of a world that tried to kill them every single day. We saw what we wanted to see, and we paid the price for our blindness. But we're friends with them now, the student said. Humans aren't that scary. The teacher clicked her mandibles in a way that might have been a smile. Individually, no, they're often kind, even gentle. But as a species, as a military force, as a unified civilization defending what they consider theirs. She pulled up a hologram of the Battle of Kaldreth Prime, showing human ships holding an entire world at their mercy. Never forget what they're capable of when pushed. The humans have a saying, peace through strength. They mean it. The student looked at the hologram, at the primitive ships with their crude weapons and simple designs that had somehow conquered the most advanced fleet in the sector. I understand, teacher. Good, because the most important lesson of the Kaldreth War isn't about technology or tactics. It's simpler than that. The teacher's eyes focused on her student. Never mistake kindness for weakness. Never assume primitive means ineffective. And never, ever underestimate someone just because they fight differently than you do. The student would carry that lesson for the rest of her life. So would every other being who'd witnessed what happened when someone made the mistake of thinking humanity was weak. Because the universe had learned an important truth, humans had spent millions of years earning their place at the top of Earth's food chain. They'd spent thousands more perfecting the art of war against each other. And now they'd brought all that experience, all that hard-won knowledge, all that barely controlled aggression to the galactic stage. The Kaldreth had thought they'd won before the battle even started. They'd thought humanity's primitive weapons and crude tactics made them easy prey. They'd thought technological superiority guaranteed victory. They were wrong, and the galaxy would never forget it.